everyone. Welcome back to the show. My name is Dan Hafner. I am joined by another guest today. It's going to be very, very exciting. We're going to talk a little bit about SaaS growth, kind of how to double things, how to engage with your customers, and how to not just build stuff that people don't really want. We've talked about this a little bit in other episodes, but I have a very special guest here that is going to enlighten us all with some of the experiences she's had and the successes that she's had. And hopefully just being a fly on the wall for this conversation will be very, very useful for all of us. So before I bring her in, as always, please, if you get value out of the show, please feel free to subscribe, share anything, whether this is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anything like that. Share the episode, share leave a rating or review. That always really, really helps to help us grow the organic growth of this podcast. So without any further ado, I am joined by Georgiana Laudi. She is the founder of Forget the Funnel. She's been pretty much launching B2B and B2C brands for a very long time, since around the early 2000s. She's really done a lot of really cool things, kind of works with founders and executives, tired of kind of having stalled growth in their SaaS, kind of turning customer insights into new success stories. So that is my little bit of intro for her. But Georgiana, she goes by Gia. So we'll address her as Gia now. But welcome to the show, Gia. How are you?
Hey, thanks. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, my SEO is just a big mess on my name. No good SEO comes from having two names. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Yeah, I'm excited. So maybe you can give us a little bit more of your quick hitter background instead of me butchering it for us.
No, that was pretty good. Yeah, I have a long background in marketing. So started really working professionally in digital marketing in the early 2000s, which is kind of crazy to say now. But I really took a turn in, I'll say 2010, 2011, when I was exposed to sort of the tech scene and the startup scene locally here. And I really sort of fell in love with tech and that community. And then in about, I want to say it was 2011 or 2012, I was at a talk at a startup conference, and Dave McClure was talking about pirate metrics. And I was like, yes, finally the world understands that marketing has a role to play post-acquisition. Because, for anybody who's not familiar with pirate metrics, it's really based on this idea that yes, acquisition is important, but also recurring revenue, activation and recurring revenue is really, really critical to success, particularly for SaaS businesses that rely on recurring revenue to survive. And so I was like, yes, finally, there's this turning point for marketers in tech. Everybody understands now that we have this role to play post-acquisition. It's 2024. I'm still talking about this same thing. It still hasn't quite hit. But what I will say is obviously a lot has changed since the early aughts. But I've been working pretty well exclusively with B2B SaaS companies since then. I was in-house for a little while. I was consulting solo for a little while. And about 7 years ago, I partnered up with my business partner, Claire Sulentrop, and her and I started Forget the Funnel, namely as a side project while we both had our independent consultancies going, to really help marketers in tech and those in sort of customer-facing roles play a bigger role in driving revenue for the companies that they were working for. And that quickly sort of turned into grabbing the attention of those in product management, certainly SaaS founders. And we have been basically for the last, how long now? I'll say 5 years. We have been working with those teams directly, and we developed a framework that we call customer-led growth, which is based on this idea that you can do pretty rapid, very targeted customer research in order to then operationalize it for your team and make a lot better decisions about how to grow. Instead of this very typical spaghetti at the wall type of marketing that so many teams are sort of falling into the trap of. And then in 2023, we launched a book about the framework, and it's a very sort of practical, very short step-by-step book that walks through, how to implement it, for your team.
That's awesome. That was a perfect segue that you could not have even planned, because that was my very first question. Um, and I think that that book, that Forget the Funnel, right? It's very, MVP research style. Because I've experienced this a lot with people I work with. Is like, hey, I have this idea that I wanted to do this and this and this and this and this. And one of my very first questions is, okay, like, is that from your mind, or have you received feedback from people?
Mhm.
Has someone actually told you that these are the features that they would want? So I think people get caught up a lot in that. But can you maybe walk us through like an example of like a when you went through this with a company or a SaaS product, and like how this approach of getting customer feedback kind of led to like a breakthrough with one of these examples?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of which example might sort of resonate the most. There's a few examples that I lean on, but one thing that I just wanted to go back to that you said that I think is really, really important is that a lot of times people start companies, founders start companies because they had the problem
Yeah.
that they want to help solve for others. And
Hmm.
so that's both a blessing and a curse a little bit. So you start out with a
Yeah.
lot of context. You're really like inside the jar, and you really end up with this sort of confirmation bias that you understand the problem um, on the same level or in a way that the rest of the market does. And you sort of make this assumption that you're seeing things the way like I am my customer is this, very,
Yeah.
old trope, right? From of founders that they are their customer. So they don't need to do customer research and they don't need to listen to customers because they are their customer. And so they don't need to learn anything about the market. And obviously that's problematic, although I will say that many companies are started in that way and that can reach early traction. Not all, but many can reach that early traction. The problems arise when you add a team, right? You start hiring people to help you, and all of a sudden they don't have that customer intel or customer knowledge that you had. Also, the market changes. So like time goes by and the market shifts and changes from when it was like when you originally experienced this problem. The market has moved on, new competitors have moved into the space. The ways of solving this problem are different. The appetite or budget has changed. I mean, certainly COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of companies in terms of what they understand and budget and even just competition. And then the other thing, so your team changes, so they don't have the context, the market changes, and then also your product evolves. And so the value that your product delivers to customers evolves from what it once was. So while, being your customer, being your own customer can work in the very, very early days, it doesn't always transition into, actually scaling and growing in a meaningful way, particularly because of that, like the team, it doesn't live inside your head. They need to be able to sort of operationalize that customer insight to make good decisions. The market changes and your product evolves. Those are like the biggest sort of culprits that I just sort of wanted to call back to. There's like a lot under the surface of,
Yeah.
that initial sort of, desire to start a company and solve a real problem. Um, we eventually get to this point of like, what got you here isn't going to get you there. And that's when it really becomes valuable to tap into what your customers know and the value that you deliver to your customers. So an example of a team that we worked with, I mean, there's one that I often go back to because it's such a straightforward story. Um, but one was a team that we were working with a couple of years ago where the founder was sort of prolific in sort of thought leadership and content, and had actually gotten to the product to a certain level of success that was really great based on the back of like really effective content marketing. So obviously the product was very helpful, but the marketing that they were using, out to attract new customers was really based on this founder being like a thought leader. This is
Yeah.
a very typical sort of scenario. And it's great. But what happened was their growth eventually started to stall out and their revenue was sort of flat for about a year. And they were like, they didn't know what to do. They had doubled down and tripled down on all the things they knew how to do. They upped their content output and their blogs. They started re-releasing like e-courses and some of the stuff that had worked for them in the past. They doubled down on their paid spend as well. But nothing was really moving the needle in terms of revenue growth. Their traffic was still going up, but revenue growth wasn't really translating. And so they knew they had to do something. And so what we did was we actually learned from customers. We reached out to the customers that were very successful with the product, but that had also adopted the product relatively recently so that they remembered what life was like before. And what we learned from those customers is that there were two very distinct groups of customers showing up. There were those that were looking to, this is a product in MarTech, in social media. And so there was one group of customers, the biggest, dominant, most vocal group of customers, and they were looking to grow on these social channels. And then there was this other sort of quieter, more under the radar group of customers that were looking to automate their process. So they had already validated these channels and were now looking to start automating. And the sort of the easy thing to miss would be that this team thought that their more vocal majority was their ideal customer, but really they were higher cost to acquire. Their retention wasn't as high. They were a bigger support burden, but they were the group of customers that this team believed were their customer base, because they were the vocal majority basically. And so what we helped them identify was actually this smaller group that stuck around for longer. They had higher LTV, they were on their higher paid plans, and they were lower cost to acquire. And when we sort of shifted their positioning and their messaging over to really speak to what those customers cared about, we updated 3 pages on their website, and their signups increased by 90% on their website. But the most interesting part, with 3 pages, homepage, features page, and pricing page. But the most interesting part of this story why I love to tell it is that their trial to paid conversion rate also increased 40%. We only updated 3 pages on their website. So It meant a higher quality customer was coming through the front door and higher converting overall, and much, lower burden on the support team as well. And that's a perfect example of a team that just barreled forward thinking that their customer was one group, had one need, when actually it was this, more under the radar customer that was really, a better fit for them. As a very typical story.
Yeah, no, that's pretty amazing. That's, even like you said, like it would actually affect the trial to conversion rate. That's really crazy. So one thing I was thinking about as you were talking about this, I want to get your thoughts on AI. And I've tried this with products that I've had. I've seen customers try this. Okay, you start this thing, you maybe have some validation, and instead of maybe reaching out to additional customers, or before you're kind of pre-revenue with customers, you go over to ChatGPT and you say, hey, I have this cool product that does X, Y, and Z. Here's the ideal avatar customer. What do you think might be additional things that they would like? I'm curious, have you ever tried this with clients? Do you have any examples of clients who have done this or used AI in this way? And what have been the results, or would you completely not recommend that at all? I'm curious where you would fall on this.
Yeah, so I actually have done quite a bit of research on this, and also experimentation. I actually did a podcast episode on this topic. Can you use AI for customer research? And the answer is different depending on your stage of company. So if you're in a pre-revenue, pre-customer situation, I think AI is a great tool to leverage. I think you absolutely can. Obviously, you should be validating it with real human beings every chance that you get. Because I have seen some pretty problematic things come out of, let's say, like ChatGPT. But that said, it's a very useful tool for getting started. You just, you need to know how to use the tool. It's a tool like any other, and AI can be problematic if, like, garbage in, garbage out. So just, be aware of that. But yes, it can absolutely be leveraged. It's especially good for like scraping the internet, for things like, product reviews of similar products in your space. Or, I would do as much with AI as I would with looking at product reviews for your competitor products, or leveraging AI to gather some of that. So like real customers, real quotes, real voice of customer from people out in the market who have the problem that your product solves. That's absolutely a viable way forward. Where I draw the line, though, is if you are in a situation where you have customers, you have a team, you have investors, you have like a real, there's like a lot at stake. I would never, ever, ever risk doing that because you can be really led astray.
Makes sense.
It can be pretty problematic. And why would you? Why would you do that when you already have these customers that are invested in your success? They want you to do well. They care about the success of your product, and they would be willing to give up a 20, 30 minute, 30 minutes of their time in order to answer some questions about what their experience was like with your solution. And so why wouldn't you just go to the source? I would never go through the trial and error of AI if I had customers to learn from and there was a lot at stake.
That's such a great answer. That makes total sense, right? Why would you lean on artificial intelligence when you could lean on real intelligence when you have it? But if you don't have it, like you said, it's a perfectly viable thing to get 90% of the way there to just start something and then kind of iterate on that. That's very genius. Very genius. Very good answer.
I would also really recommend Rob Fitzpatrick's The Mom Test for anybody who's early stage as well that wants to do customer development. It was written pre-AI, but the sort of fundamentals in there, I would definitely lean on again for like just tools for getting outside of your own head on this stuff and really sort of validating the demand out in the market. It's a great read, and I would highly, highly recommend it. If you're in the situation where you have customers to learn from, then I would be leaning a little bit more towards like our book and our method, because it's kind of a go between. Like we're not the big we're not the big research firms. We sort of straddle the sort of that early stage, what got you here isn't going to get you there sort of stage of growth. And we really advocate for like quite iterative and MVP style research, but it is legitimate research versus AI, which is a little bit, more hypothesis mode style research, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And I will actually add another resource for any of you listening. What was that called? The Mom Test, you said?
The Mom Test. Yeah. Rob Fitzpatrick.
Rob Fitzpatrick. There's another one I would recommend too. It's relatively new. It's called The $1 Million Weekend by Noah Kagan, the founder of AppSumo.
Yep.
If you read that with an eye towards software or like a mind towards software, it's very genius. It's very, very cool because he talks a lot about that too. But yeah,
I haven't
okay.
read it, but I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it yet.
Very, very well worth it. Very worth it. So, okay. So I want to get your opinion on this. So you've been in this space for a while. I don't want to age you. You're a lady. I'm a gentleman. I don't want to go down that path. But you've been doing this a while. So I'm kind of curious over your career, maybe even just the past decade or so, 5-10 years. What do you see as like some of the biggest shifts that have been occurring in like what people expect, like what customers expect from their products or their solutions that they pay for, or are we getting better with aligning with these? Like, what do people expect? How are these things shifting?
That's a great question. I mean, I certainly, if you go back 10, 15 years, people's expectations were a lot, lower just because, cloud software and SaaS was a little bit newer, and our expectations of like from a user experience and user interface standpoint were quite a bit different. Now expectations are a lot higher. Even B2B purchasers expect, which is the vast majority of SaaS, but they expect a much more B2C experience. This has been true for a number of years, but it is particularly true now. And I mean, I'll say now. I mean, I feel like I can't say the word now in SaaS without it automatically implying AI. And I'm not referring to AI here at all. It's really just about that user experience and this expectation that teams are going to, or products rather, are going to provide us with a seamless experience and really understand who we are. Like there's this expectation that if I haven't activated within your product, don't send me an email about, advanced feature usage. it's 2024. Like there's
Mm.
no reason for us to be sending an email about, about using our product in a way that our customers aren't ready for, or that haven't done yet, or that don't reflect the actions that customers have actually taken in your product. There's no excuse for that
Mm.
anymore. We have, product analytics is a very real thing. Like there's no reason for you not to know if your customer has activated in your product or not. I cannot tell you the amount of teams that we work with that have like the best intentions in the world, and they may even be tracking some of these things, but they haven't actually actioned it in their customers' experience. So they know when somebody hits, a critical sort of product activation threshold. We do a lot of helping teams with product onboarding, because a lot of the time the most money sitting on the table is in product onboarding. It isn't in sending more people to the website. It's in activating more of those people that bother to sign up for your website, right? So I
Yeah.
talked a little bit about like messaging on the website, but then there's also the customer onboarding experience. And so in that customer onboarding experience, it's really important to provide appropriate messaging to our customers, even if that's in a product walkthrough, or if your customer drops out of your product, sending them an email that is directly related to the problem that they were trying to solve when they signed up for your solution, and the next most important thing for them to do in your product. Not all the tools in the toolbox, or like don't throw the kitchen sink at them. And again, I say this, and I work with teams, large and small, and even the larger, more sophisticated teams, you'd be very surprised that they throw the kitchen sink at their customers. And then the customers are like, see right past that now. It's 2024.
Mm.
There's no reason to be, providing this like clunky, lazy customer experience. Customers expect a lot more than that now.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. No, that it makes a lot of sense because it's almost like you don't want to be vomited on. You don't want to be like just kind of, that's a grotesque image to put in you guys if you're just listening. But you don't want to just be I think it's kind of goes back to like the original sales process. People don't want to be sold, they want to buy things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to sell me, I want to buy
100%.
something. So
Yeah, exactly.
that's
There's a
interesting.
very like the work that we do, what we learn from one of the most valuable questions that you can ask your customer is, what was it that convinced you that we were going to be able to solve your problem over, all of the other solutions?
Hmm.
What was that single thing that convinced you? Because the answer to that question will tell you if you can, we go through this exercise, we call it value mapping, but we basically take what customers said mattered to them and map it to the specific parts of the product that deliver that value. And so if you can go through that very valuable exercise, you will know exactly what part of your product, what product attribute, what feature to show them in what order. And so if you show them just that thing that they care the most about in that early product experience, and leveraging email, because as much as people, hate email, they do appreciate helpful emails, and 70% of people who sign up for a product log in once and never log in again. So if you're not leveraging email, you are missing out on a massive opportunity. But that email during that early product experience really needs to be laser focused on the thing that they actually care about, not the kitchen sink. So like, yeah, the vomit analogy is an awful one to visualize, but it is very, very true. We refer to it as like kitchen sink, or toys in the toy box, or tools in the toolbox. Just like make sure you're pulling the right one out for your customer that cares a lot.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with you with the email stuff. If you're, I mean, I know there's tools that I've accessed that I've purchased or done whatever with, and I might not go back for a month or two, or if ever, so that's that. But if I
100%.
see an email that's like prompting me or nudging me, that's well crafted, I'm very much more
Mhm.
likely to do that. That's very good. Very good
Yeah.
reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question I have. Um, I mean, this kind of builds off what we talked about with the AI stuff a little bit, but I'm curious, like when do you know when I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this. What's the first step to kind of move from like, okay, I have a gut feeling, even if after I've got some customer feedback and I've got, maybe it's not quite as conclusive. I've talked with 10 of my customers and they kind of gave me stuff that's, I don't really see any, I kind of see some trends, but I see not really like a super strong, like, okay, this is what we need to do. Um, what do you tell people to kind of go with their gut? Do you tell them to be very data focused? What's what is there a threshold there when you're like, my gut's just telling me I need to build this new thing, even though the data might not really, I kind of read between the lines what my customer said, but my gut just tells me like this new thing is going to be the thing that they need. Is there like a threshold there that you could think of?
Um, I mean, it's a good question. I think the there's a couple of different ways to take this, right? If you're talking about the first sort of go to market for a brand new product, my answer would be different than an existing product that is interested in potentially adding like an AI component. I don't know if that's where you were originally going with the question when you
And that's a good
referenced AI.
example. That's a great example.
I mean, the answer to the question would be very different depending on those two situations, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
In the first situation, I mean, this is going back to my like Unbound landing page days where I wouldn't say our ideal or target market, but there was a certain segment of our customers that were leveraging landing pages to validate product ideas. And that can be a really effective way to validate an idea. It's just build a landing page and put it out into the world and see if anybody is interested in it. Now, I'm not saying do the whole bait and switch thing. Obviously, build the landing page in such a way that communicates that, like, I don't know, the product hasn't launched yet or something to that effect, but you can leverage a small, performance marketing or ad spend to a landing page to validate a product direction if you wanted. So you have to be pretty good at like the marketing aspects or the messaging aspect of it and doing a good job of like, selling it and really articulating the value proposition. But I have seen a lot of, early stage companies do that even before they invest a ton in product development, just to help validate the idea. So that's like really, really early stage. And then there's the flip side of the coin, which is like an established product that is looking to potentially incorporate AI into their offering. And then, the answer there would be very, very different. I mean, one of the things that I would probably do, and this is, I mean, not going to surprise anybody, but I talk to customers and find out from them, what value do they get from our product today? And what are they challenged with next? So that potentially, I mean, we tell this, even if it's not about AI, we do this with the teams that we work with all the time, where we learn from customers what they have been really successful with, what value the product is bringing to their lives today, but also what are they challenged with in addition, like this adjacent challenge that we might be able to support them on with a new feature set, or maybe it's AI, it's kind of besides the point. But what other future sort of adjacent opportunities exist with our customer base? Because there tends to be many, and like, why guess? And it can help validate some ideas that you already have on your product roadmap, or maybe it might bring in completely new ideas. But really, at the end of the day, it's understanding what is the problem that we help solve for people, and really deeply understanding the context and the circumstances that people are in when they're solving that problem, that will help sort of open the doors for a bunch of opportunities that we otherwise can't see because we're inside the jar and can sometimes have a hard time reading the label from inside the jar.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you said that, because that actually that kind of actually brought something back up that I had thought about when you were answering your first question earlier about like who are the most successful customers and getting feedback from them and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting for you to say that, sometimes it's not just those people, but the people that are actually kind of experiencing some second level problems with the thing. Like, for example, we're working with a client now where they basically were making meal plans and meals inside of that, but it was all manually done, and that was kind of part of the initial build of this. Like, that's just what we needed to be able to accomplish. He came to me and he said, "Hey, we kind of actually would like to kind of streamline this, and why not use AI for this to be able to say, hey, like, build me this menu," and that would save them 90% of the time that they spend using this thing. And I was like, that makes total sense, right? So we're actually we actually put that together and we launched, and we're getting feedback on that now. So I'm very interested to kind of coach him through maybe like what you're coaching me through right now. So that's very cool. But you talk about forget the funnel, and I think about this funnel of, I've studied a lot of this stuff too, and it's almost like when you sell somebody one thing, you're kind of actually creating a new problem for them in some way, right? In some things. And I'm trying to think of a good example, but that, I mean, the one I just went to was kind of like that. It's like, hey, I have this great tool that I can build this stuff with, but now I need to actually, like, it takes too much time for me to be able to do. So now there's this second level, you come in with a second level solution.
Yeah.
Like you think about the healthcare or like pharmaceutical industry about like, hey, you take this pill to lose weight, but now like, well, now I'm sneezing my head off. Well, here, take this pill to solve it. It's almost like you know what I mean? You're just stacking, and that's how you get to take. I mean, that's just one
You
example.
with the terrible analogies. That is an awful one as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But
My
you're not
analogy
wrong.
game is not on point today.
You are not wrong though.
But
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, integrations are a good example there with the earlier stage companies where they then realize that like, oh, we could really help our customers streamline things if we integrated with this adjacent tool. And that opens up a huge opportunity as well, sometimes with like co-marketing or collaboration with that product. That can be part of expanding on the value that you provide customers. But there's other things too. There's like advanced feature usage. There's all kinds, like annual contracts or adding additional seats or different permissions on additional seats because the functional user at a larger team may need an admin type. There's all kinds of ways that your product can evolve. And I think that the best product teams and the best product owners and managers know that like the answer to where the product evolves to comes from that customer. It can be, a little bit harder when the team is small and it's just you and you're trying to make all the decisions. But at the end of the day, if you really inherently and like deeply understand the problem that you're solving for your customer, I think the opportunities become really, really obvious. The thing that I would just caution against is just like, don't only do that customer research once, particularly if your product is evolving and the value your product provides to your customers evolves over time as your product evolves. And so like we have teams that we've worked with that were relatively early stage that we learned, as much as we could with their earlier customers. Let's say, we do like 8 interviews and we learn everything we can from those 8 customers. And we provide the team with basically a path for providing a customer experience that will help as many of them as possible be as successful with this product as possible. And then a year later, they're like, oh yeah, our product has evolved a little bit. We have more customers now. And like, we need to do this again because our, the value that our product provides is different. And our customer has also evolved as well. And so you would do it again. So this is not the type of research you do once. Again, like I said before, people on your team change, people come and go or, get added. Your product evolves, the market evolves. So this is never like a one and done thing. And I often get asked like, how often should we be doing this type of research? And the answer always depends on like, well, how quickly is your market and your product evolving? Generally, I would recommend, like every 6 months or every year, again, depending on the velocity of like your product development. But any sort of major shift in your product offering, I would actually go back and learn like, what is the value that we're now providing? What is it that really stands out in customers' minds about why they choose us over all of the other solutions? Because you'll get more resonant like messaging and copy, ideas to use on your website and your marketing materials, but you'll also get a lot more insight into your product onboarding experience again, so that all that marketing spend becomes worth it, right? And you can actually onboard customers in a way that doesn't require a high touch or sales and actually genuinely leverage, product-led growth and programmatic communication to activate customers and help them adopt your product successfully and deliver recurring value. That's what we're about with that. The customer-led growth framework is really about that. It's like identifying the milestones, those moments of success on your customer's relationship with you that you need to basically demonstrate value so that your customer hits this milestone. Don't show them anything else, right? Just make sure that they hit this milestone. And in general, we talk about like first value, value realization, and continued value and value growth. Particularly for SaaS companies, continued value and value growth is critical. Or I shouldn't even only say SaaS. Any recurring revenue business lives and dies on delivering continued value, and also gets really interesting when we start talking about net revenue retention. right? When we're focused on that value growth aspect of things. So if you can really get crystal clear on like what your customers need at each of these milestones and even programmatically deliver that to them, you are laughing. Like that is the best situation you could possibly get into. It's why many people get into the SaaS business and recurring revenue business is for that promise. And I don't know how you would do that without deeply understanding what your customers need at each of those milestones. You'd just be guessing.
Wow, guys, you should really go back and re-listen to the last like 3 or 4 minutes of what she was just talking about because there's a lot of gold nuggets in there. Um, my last thing was going to be, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up? That was a pretty good summary. But I'll give you the floor one more time. Just you kind of already provided that, but do you have any other final thoughts before we close at all?
Yeah, I mean, I would just reiterate that honestly, is that you don't have to guess. The answers are, available to you. Particularly if you have happily paying customers, there is absolutely no reason for you or your team to be guessing what to do and how to grow. There's very, very likely a plethora of opportunity there, and you shouldn't be guessing at that. So that's what I would say, honestly. I see a lot of wasted marketing spend with teams that don't deeply enough understand who they're serving and the problem that they're solving. And it is like,
Yeah.
it's an epidemic. It's a big problem.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wasted marketing spend out there in the world that is like needless. So that's what I would say. And then I guess the last thing would be, we wrote our book to be very short and practical. Like it is a very short read. We worked very hard to like trim all the fluff out of it. So if anybody's interested in like potentially leveraging, this type of process for their team, I would highly encourage you to pick up the book just because it's so straightforward and such a quick read, and you can make a decision for yourself whether or not you think it's something that could work for you.
Yeah, and that's called Forget the Funnel, right?
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right, where can we get that?
Well, forgetthefunnel.com is the website, and there's like along the top nav there's a link to the book, but it's also available on Amazon.
Okay, awesome. We'll put the link for there. Is there anywhere else that you'd like to point people to at all?
No, the website's probably the best place. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. But you do have a show as well, right? You have a podcast. You said you have your own podcast. Is it called Forget the Funnel as well?
It's also called Forget the Funnel.
All
Yeah,
right,
we
great.
we try
Great
to keep
brand.
it pretty consistent across
Nice.
the board. Yeah, yeah. That's
Okay.
also the name of the consultancy that we work with SaaS teams, and then the book is also called that. The podcast is also called that. Not super creative when it comes to naming.
Well, the brand is called Forget Your Funnel.
Forget the Funnel.
Forget the funnel, but I don't want you guys to forget Gia, okay? Because her name, Georgiana Laudi, don't forget her name. You can forget the funnel, but don't forget her because she is amazing. And this has been a really, really insightful episode. Thank you so much for coming on and
Thanks,
sharing all
Dan.
of this. It was really, really great.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun.
Awesome. Excuse me. All right, gang. That is it for this episode. As always, you can check out the links in the show notes to for her book, Forget the Funnel, and I'll even include the link to her show there as well. But as you could probably find it on your own. But yeah, this was really, really insightful. Like I said, kind of maybe go back to that the whole thing was great, but that last little 4-minute segment she had there was amazing. I was sitting here like fireworks going off my head. It was amazing. So thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. As always, please like and rate the show. We always appreciate that. And we will talk to you guys next time.